Right now, I mean, there's a startup called Praxis that has like $500 million sitting in the bank for one very specific purpose.
Yeah, and it's not a small goal.
No, not at all. It is to build a new country. I don't mean a metaverse game, or some digital collective. I mean a physical sovereign city with its own economy, its own borders, and its own laws.
It sounds exactly like a cyberpunk novel,
Right.
right? But the capital backing it is entirely real.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're looking at a fundamental shift here where the internet is moving beyond just, transferring information or financial value. It's actively trying to architect physical sovereignty.
Welcome to today's deep dive. So, if you're listening to this, you probably already know the internet has evolved. But today, we are exploring the absolute bleeding edge of decentralized living.
The real frontier.
Exactly. Our mission today is to figure out how you get from a blockchain protocol to a literal recognized nation state. And, to untangle the massive technical and societal hurdles standing in the way.
And the stack of sources we're pulling from today is just fascinating because it spans the entire stack of a civilization.
It really does.
We've got technical documentation on the 2026 state of Ethereum Layer 2 scaling, so specifically looking at Arbitrum and Optimism. We also have this mathematically brutal academic paper on the failure of DAO governance.
That paper is a reality check, for sure. We also have theoretical blueprints for building a network state and a Grokipedi breakdown on Praxis and how they actually plan to bypass traditional international law.
Right.
But, before we can talk about a country in the cloud, we have to talk about the digital concrete it's built on. Because if you want to support millions of citizens transacting every second, you need serious plumbing.
You really do, which is why we have to start at the infrastructure layer. If you look at Ethereum Layer 2s right now in 2026, the transaction fees have essentially plummeted to zero.
Right.
But it's important to understand how that actually happened. So both Arbitrum and Optimism are using optimistic rollups, but the real unlock came from the EIP 48444 update, specifically like the introduction of blobs.
Yeah, I was looking into the mechanics of those EIP 4844 blobs. Because normally if you put data on a blockchain, it's just there forever.
Right, permanent.
And every node has to store it until the end of time, which obviously makes block space incredibly expensive. But blobs act entirely differently, don't they?
They do. Think of a blob as a temporary data attachment rather than permanent ledger storage.
Okay.
The Layer 2 network basically bundles up thousands of transactions, attaches them to Ethereum as a blob, and Ethereum is just like, I will verify this data existed and was correct at this specific moment, but I'm only going to store it for a few weeks.
Right.
By dropping that requirement for eternal data storage, the cost of a transaction just fell to fractions of a cent.
So the plumbing is finally cheap. And both Arbitrum and Optimism use native ETH for gas. Both are basically free to use. But when you look under the hood at their developer docs, they are building completely different architectures.
Completely different.
Like Arbitrum is currently dominating the TVL, sitting around, what, $1.5 to $2 billion? And they rely on this custom fraud-proof system called Nitro, which is WASM-based. Why does that actually matter to an end user?
Well, it matters because of the developers it attracts. So WASM stands for WebAssembly. And by integrating a WASM-based environment through their stylus upgrade, Arbitrum essentially allowed developers to write smart contracts in traditional, highly efficient programming languages.
Like C++ and Rust.
Exactly, instead of being forced to use Solidity. So when you can write highly complex, high-performance code directly on-chain, you attract the hardcore DeFi power users.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why Arbitrum is the hub for perpetuals, where users are trading, complex leveraged derivatives at incredibly high speeds.
Right. And that customizable philosophy really extends to their franchise model, Arbitrum Orbit. Looking at this, I initially thought of it like, I don't know, opening a McDonald's franchise. But it's deeper than that.
It is.
With Orbit, you aren't just taking their branding, you're actually renting their security. You can launch your own highly customized chain, pick whatever gas token you want, and just serve whatever menu of applications you want.
Exactly.
Arbitrum's underlying code basically just acts as your health inspector, ensuring no one on your custom chain gets cheated.
That is a much better way to look at it. Orbit really prioritizes ultimate sovereignty for the builder. But Optimism took a completely divergent path with their OP Stack codebase.
Right. They aren't trying to build isolated custom franchises.
Yeah. No, they're building the superchain.
The superchain is just this massive alliance. You've got Base, WorldChain, Zora. If Arbitrum Orbit is a bunch of independent restaurants renting security, the superchain feels way more like the European Union of blockchains.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
They share the exact same open source software, they share strict borders, and they share a MIPS-based fault-proof virtual machine called Canon.
And the key mechanism there is shared sequencing. Optimism's goal is seamless, one-block interoperability. So if the superchain functions perfectly, an end user shouldn't even know they're hopping between Base and Zora.
Each just feels like one network.
Right. It should feel like one logical chain split across many physical servers. And because of that shared environment, they are optimizing heavily for consumer applications, social identity, media, rather than, hardcore high-leverage DeFi.
But I've been wrestling with a question while reading this. If the transaction fees are practically free on both, and a swap executes instantly on both, I just don't get what the actual battleground is.
Oh, it's interesting.
Like, are they just fighting over developer mindshare? Or is there a deeper philosophical divide here?
The divide is actually entirely philosophical, and it comes down to governance. Arbitrum's governance is very operational. It focuses on the protocol's technical efficiency. Optimism, however, is heavily ideological. They utilize this bicameral governance structure, a token house and a citizen's house, and they rely on retro PGF.
Which is retroactive public goods funding.
Exactly.
Okay, wait. If Optimism is distributing millions of dollars in OP tokens to fund public goods, who actually decides where that money goes? Because if it's just token holders voting in a DAO, aren't we literally just reinventing a system where whoever has the most money buys the most votes?
You've just hit the exact crisis point of Web3 democracy.
Really?
Yeah. The standard DAO voting model is one token, one vote. And with average voter participation sitting at a pretty dismal 5% across the industry, whales, the massive token holders, completely dictate the outcomes.
Which perfectly brings us to this 2026 academic paper in our stack. It's titled, Concave is the New Linear, the Impossibility of Anti-Plutocratic DAO Governance.
Such a brutal title.
It is. And honestly, reading this was shocking. Because for years, the theoretical fix to this whole rule by the rich thing was supposed to be quadratic voting.
Right, and in theory, quadratic voting or concave voting is elegant. The mechanism forces a voter to pay exponentially more for each additional vote they cast.
So one token equals one vote.
Yes. But if you want 2 votes, it costs you 4 tokens, 3 votes cost 9 tokens, and so on. The math was specifically designed to dampen the power of a whale and amplify the voice of a retail user.
I mean, it sounds like a perfect mathematical fix. But this paper completely torches it. They mathematically proved that this defense is just impossible to enforce on a permissionless blockchain.
It really is.
So wait, after a decade of Web3 promising to democratize finance, this paper mathematically proves we just built a more efficient oligarchy.
Essentially, yes. The researchers built a costed model that factors in all the realistic frictions of a blockchain.
Like what?
So the gas cost to spin up a new wallet, the minimum balance required to hold a token, the base fee to cast a vote. And they discovered that any rational attacker with a massive budget is never going to keep all their tokens in a single wallet and suffer that quadratic penalty.
Right, they just execute a Sybil attack. It's literally like a billionaire trying to influence a local election by putting on thousands of fake mustaches and voting thousands of times.
Exactly.
The attacker just takes their massive token stack and writes a script to divide it evenly across thousands of freshly generated anonymous wallets.
And the mechanics of the attack are devastatingly simple. Because creating a wallet on Ethereum is unrestricted and anonymous, the optimal strategy is to just bypass the concave voting curve entirely.
So they just pay the setup fees.
Yeah. The attacker pays the miner $65,000 gas fee for the ERC-20 transfer to fund each new wallet and pays the voting fee. The researchers prove that once an attacker optimizes the number of wallets, their voting power stops being quadratic and becomes asymptotically linear again. The system that was supposed to stop them just turns into a minor administrative tax.
Let's talk about the simulations they ran on real DAO proposals, because that's where the math gets genuinely terrifying.
Okay.
They replayed a historical Uniswap DAO vote.
Oh, this part was wild.
An attacker using this exact Sybil strategy could capture a $300 million vote for just $75,000 in gas and token costs. That is a 4,000 times amplification factor compared to an honest retail user.
Right. And when they tested steeper power rules, like trying to make the quadratic curve even more punishing, the amplification factor exceeded 229,000 times.
Unbelievable.
But the most critical finding in the paper is about friction. A lot of developers assume they could just fix this by raising the gas fees or, requiring a high minimum balance in every wallet to vote.
But the paper shows that just doesn't work. Adding economic friction doesn't change the order of the math, it just slightly lowers the slope of the attacker's advantage.
Right.
As long as the cost to create a wallet doesn't depend on the user's real-world identity, the whale always wins.
Always. Which leaves the ecosystem with a pretty stark realization. If we continue to rely on anonymous, permissionless wallets as the basis for voting, democratic governance in Web3 fundamentally fails.
Period.
Yeah. To fix the math, you cannot tweak the voting algorithm. You have to fix the wallet itself.
You have to tie the wallet to an untransferable identity. And that is exactly where Soulbound Tokens, or SBTs, enter the picture. I actually love that the origin of this concept is literally pulled from the video game Minecraft.
Yes, it's such a great origin story.
In the game, certain items are soulbound, meaning you can't drop them, you can't trade them, or sell them to another player. They are permanently attached to your character.
And translating that to Web3, an SBT is a non-transferable token held in your wallet. And in this context, your wallet is referred to as your soul.
Oh, yeah.
These tokens represent your credentials, your employment history, your social affiliations, and they're issued by other souls. So a university issues an SBT for your degree, or an employer issues one for your work history.
It's basically a permanent, cryptographically verified digital resume that also doubles as a credit score.
Exactly.
And this solves the DAO governance crisis because it enables what the researchers call a decentralized society, or DSOC. If a DAO bases its voting on SBTs, you can finally weight votes by reputation instead of just capital.
Right.
But the truly brilliant part is the anti-collusion mechanism. How does a soul-bound token mathematically downgrade a Sybil attack?
Well, it looks for correlation. A Sybil attacker might be able to generate 10,000 fake wallets, right? But they cannot easily generate 10,000 unique verified social histories.
Oh, that makes sense.
So if a DAO proposal is up for a vote and 50 wallets all vote the exact same way, the DSOC algorithm scans their souls.
Okay.
If all 50 wallets hold the exact same employment SBT, the exact same conference attendance SBT, and the exact same foreign participation SBT, the system mathematically assumes they are either a single Sybil attacker or a highly coordinated voting cartel.
So it automatically discounts their votes. You can fake capital by splitting it up, but you basically can't fake a deeply diverse, historically verified social graph.
Precisely. And once you establish that untransferable, verified identity, you unlock financial mechanisms that traditional DeFi could literally never achieve. Uncollateralized lending is the biggest one.
Right.
Historically, in crypto, if you wanted to borrow $100, you had to lock up $150 of Ethereum as collateral. It's just terribly capital inefficient.
Because the protocol doesn't know who you are, so it has to assume you'll default.
Exactly.
But with SBTs, a lending protocol can look at your on-chain credit score. It can see your past repayment SBTs, your employment status, your community reputation. You can actually borrow against your social standing.
And the applications extend far beyond just lending. The sources outline systems for secure property rentals using entry and deal tokens.
Oh, right, I saw that.
A prospective tenant applies and receives an entry SBT. When they sign the lease, a smart contract mints a deal SBT. The smart contract handles the rent payments automatically, and a peer-to-peer review system adjusts your reputation score over time.
But there's a massive catch there.
Yeah.
The documentation notes that if your rental reputation score drops below a certain threshold, say you trash the apartment or just stop paying, your collateral is automatically liquidated by the smart contract.
Yeah.
And you are programmatically banned from the platform. It's incredibly efficient, but man, it's ruthless. And that brings up a huge practical fear for me.
What's that?
If this single wallet, this soul, holds my entire identity, my credit score, my rental history, what happens if I lose my private keys? Do I just lose my soul?
In the old paradigm of crypto, yeah. If you lost your seed phrase, your assets were gone forever. But DeSrock introduces a mechanism called community recovery.
How does that work?
Since your soul is essentially the intersection of your social network, you don't rely on a piece of paper hidden in a safe. Instead, you nominate a random subset of your communities, the organizations, and individuals you hold shared SBTs with.
Okay.
If your keys are lost or compromised, a supermajority of that social network can cryptographically vote to recover and update your keys.
You are literally embedding your security directly into your human relationships. That is wild.
It is.
So let's kind of pull all these threads together. We have scalable subset infrastructure with layer 2s. We have a mathematically sound way to govern and identify people using soulbound tokens and decentralized society mechanics. We have the foundational tech, which means we finally have the blueprints to build an actual country.
Yes. This is the transition from software to sovereignty. Balaji Srinivasan outlined this in his concept of the network state.
Right.
He defines it as a highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory and eventually gains diplomatic recognition.
And he lays it out in 7 distinct steps. Step 1 is you found a startup society based on a moral innovation.
Right. It has to have a purpose.
Yeah, it can't just be a business looking for tax breaks. It needs a guiding principle. The source uses a hypothetical keto state, basically a society entirely focused on health, fitness, and extending human lifespan.
And then step 2 is organizing collective action online. Step 3 is building offline trust while running an internal online crypto economy.
Okay.
And then step 4 is where it gets real. You crowdfund physical nodes. You aren't buying a massive island all at once. You buy an apartment building in Tokyo, a farm in Texas, a co-working space in London.
And then step 5 is you digitally connect those physical nodes.
Yeah.
Your capital city essentially exists in the cloud, navigated through AR, VR, and Web3 infrastructure, and it acts as the connective tissue between these physical enclaves all over the world.
Exactly.
Step 6 is conducting an on-chain census to mathematically prove to the world your population size, your GDP, and your holding power.
Which sets up step 7, the ultimate goal, which is achieving diplomatic recognition from existing legacy nations.
Right.
By proving massive decentralized economic power through an on-chain census, the network state can negotiate treaties, trade agreements, and recognize sovereignty.
It is literally reverse colonization. You start a country in the cloud, build the culture and the economy, and then you download it to the physical earth.
That's a great way to put it.
But obviously, not everyone views this as a techno-utopia. Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin had some very sharp critiques in the source material.
He did. Buterin warns about the negative externalities. If only the highly skilled, highly capitalized individuals can afford to, exit to these bespoke network states, you create a devastating brain drain.
Right.
It leaves legacy nations starved of talent and capital, leaving the most vulnerable populations behind. And on top of that, he argues these network states require an exit-to-community mechanism.
What does that mean?
If a corporate founder starts the state, they cannot retain permanent control. Governance has to transition to the citizens, or you just end up with a digital dictatorship.
Which brings us back to where we started, praxis. Because everything outlined here is actively being executed right now, Praxis just secured $525 million in financing from massive players in the space.
They are explicitly targeting what they call high-agency individuals, so founders, researchers, and creatives who feel their progress is being choked by regulatory stagnation in traditional countries.
Yeah.
They are partnering with Zaha Hadid architects to design a physical city that integrates classical aesthetics with aggressive futurism. Think modular housing, 3D printed food production, and an economy driven heavily by AI.
And their location scouting is fascinating. They're looking at the Mediterranean, they're looking at Greenland, and they're even planning an Atlas spaceport city at Vandenberg Space Force Base. But why these specific locations? Reading through the Praxis strategy, it's heavily reliant on regulatory arbitrage. They aren't trying to fight a war for independence. They are trying to negotiate special economic zones or charter city status with host nations that desperately want their tech capital.
Exactly. They leverage their $500 million treasury and their network of high net worth citizens to convince a host nation to basically carve out a jurisdiction where Praxis can write its own local laws and utilize blockchain governance.
Right.
And Praxis isn't alone. You have Petri Friedman working on non-democratic, for-profit corporate cities. You have Prospera in Honduras, which is a physical semi-autonomous zone where disputes are handled via online arbitration by retired judges. You even have pop-up cities like Edge City in Patagonia, which act as month-long society incubators for micro-exits.
I actually want to pause here for a second and address you, the listener, directly, because there is intense political and societal tension surrounding this topic. Critics look at Praxis and network states and see an elitist escape hatch, a way for billionaires to evade taxes, dismantle democratic regulations, and accelerate the collapse of public institutions.
Yeah.
But supporters look at the exact same data and argue it's the ultimate free market innovation for human flourishing, just a necessary bypass around legacy bureaucracy that can handle the speed of AI and crypto. And we are not taking a side here.
No, not at all.
We are not endorsing either viewpoint. Our job is just to examine the blueprints of what is actively being built right now with hundreds of millions of dollars.
And regardless of which side of the ideological divide you fall on, the mechanics of governance are undeniably shifting. The experiment of the network state has officially moved from white papers to deployment.
It really has. Today, we trace the entire evolutionary chain. We started in the raw plumbing of Ethereum Layer 2s, exploring how temporary data blobs and WALEVM fault proofs drove transaction costs to zero. We broke down the mathematically proven failure of anonymous DAO voting, where Sybil attackers can just bypass quadratic voting curves entirely. We explored how Soulbound Tokens fixed that by tying your wallet to an untransferable, mathematically verified social reputation.
Yeah.
And we looked at how all of this infrastructure is culminating in physical startup cities like Praxis. So I'll ask you, listening to this, if you could opt into a cloud country right now, what would its moral innovation be? What singular purpose would make you pack up your physical life and join a network state?
That is the allure of the network state for sure. But as you think about that, there is one final implication buried in the math of decentralized society that we really need to consider.
Okay, what is it?
Well, a true network state relies on soulbound tokens for everything, right? Your voting weight, your uncollateralized lending, your ability to rent property, and the recovery of your private keys are all entirely controlled by your social network and your on-chain reputation.
Yeah.
So what happens to a citizen who is mathematically canceled by their own community? Oh, wow. So if the algorithm downgrades your shared SBTs?
Yes. If your community decides you are no longer aligned, your reputation score drops. Your collateral is automatically liquidated.
That's brutal.
Your voting power vanishes. And because your security relies on community recovery, your social network can just refuse to restore your keys, effectively locking you out of your own assets.
Wow.
In a traditional nation, you can always just walk across a physical border. But if your entire identity, finances, and security are cryptographically bound to a decentralized social graph, does the ultimate freedom of a cloud country accidentally create the ultimate inescapable digital prison?